All right. Thank you so much for your interest and watching this video. So I'm Kiran Garimella. I'm an assistant professor at Rutgers University, the School of Communication and Information. I am going to present this work on uh, the link between television and social media. This is a joint work with Abhilash Datta, who's a student at IIT Kharagpur in India. So, okay, this is about the link between television and social media. Okay, why do we care about television, especially at ICWSM? Okay, television may be a dying medium. That's what I would say. But the counterpoint there is that television has a huge reach, right? Like so, potentially tens of millions of people watch television still, and tens of millions might still be a very small number compared to the billions of people who are on social media. But the impact of television in terms of agenda setting, so in terms of how the effects are going to be, who watches television, like whether it's the people who vote are more likely to be television watchers than be on social media. Similarly, the people who make policy might be influenced more by stuff that appears on television and so on. So television is still very important, and there's this very nice very interesting book called Network Propaganda, which shows the role of television in mainstreaming and spreading the political polarization, propaganda, misinformation during the 2016 US elections. Uh, and so in this work, we're going to look at this intersection of television and social media. And, traditionally, this sort of link between television and social media is very understudied. I mean, there was a lot of work, a lot of excitement on like social TV back in the original days of social media. This was maybe 15 years ago. And but then people were not able to figure out like how these sorts of mediums interact with each other, and then slowly social media started to dominate and probably overtake television. To a large extent, currently that's the situation we're in, where we don't really look at this sort of flows of information between these two, but this information is highly networked, right? Like so, there are lots of cases which are obvious where that content on television is cut out into smaller pieces, put on TikTok or on Twitter or Instagram and so on, and then some other commentary is made on top of that, and or commentary from social media makes its way onto television, and then there's this sort of loop. And the important thing here, especially thinking of the audience, is that a lot of the exposure that content gets is pretty complementary, right? Like so, some parts of it might be important. For instance, television is a broadcast medium. You really get that quick broadcast, and to people who are important and matter, and also, yeah, this is a very complementary audience to what your content might get on social media. So there's lots of very interesting concepts here. One of the key theorization in this paper is the existence of this information loop on between television and social media, right? Like so, this concept that I mentioned, so content from television being posted and discussed on social media, some of that discussion making its way back onto television. So this creates this information loop. A very popular example of an information loop like this is Donald Trump, right? Like so, this is already well established. Trump sees, watches Fox News a lot, so he sees something that appears on television, and then he tweets about it a few minutes later, right? Like so, and there's lots of instances of that. Okay, Comey is being talked about on social media. Trump tweets about Comey a while ago, a while later. But the more important thing is this sort of feedback loop where okay, Trump tweets something that is then covered as news again. And there's a lot of evidence that shows, hundreds of minutes of coverage for Trump's tweets. So this is specifically for Trump's tweets saying, okay, Trump tweeted this being covered as news. Right. Obviously, I mean, this is an extreme case. So Trump was the president, so anything he tweets is news. But this is also, there is this sort of symbiotic relationship. That is what we show in this paper. So this paper is from the Indian context, where there is collusion between television networks in India and social media to spread propaganda. Okay, so let's talk about the case study here. I'll set the stage first. Firstly, we're discussing like mainstream television news, prime time news channels in India, particularly one channel. I'll talk about it in a second. So most of the mainstream news channels have now been captured They are extremely partisan, cover only one side of the spectrum, and are almost always support this sort of far right Hindu majority party called the BJP. And this party is very well known for its social media prowess, right? So they have huge infrastructure that they've created to create and disseminate content on social media. So this is an article from the Washington Post last year, which talks about the highlighted bit here. It says 150,000 social media workers were used to propagate content on WhatsApp and other networks and social media. So this is 150,000 people just in one state in one election, right? Like, so think about the entire apparatus. So the context here is, again, media is all very biased towards one side. There's supporting this one political party which has a very strong social media presence and a social media army. Right. So in terms of the media, we are focusing on this one channel. It is called Republic TV. This is the largest English channel TV news in India. And they have a primetime debate show, which is like the highlight of the channel. It's hosted by this person called Arnab Goswami. Has over 5 million daily viewers. So this is, very popular show. 5 million viewers on television is very, very, very high. Like, for instance, the most popular show in the US, which is Tucker Carlson's show, used to be. It had peak ratings of around 3 million people a day. So this is much bigger than that, right? And the format of these debates is, you have a topic every day, and then the guests invited and they discuss and debate the show. The show primarily also uses hashtags to invite online discussion. So for instance, every beginning of the show, there is this sort of topic that is discussed, and every topic has a corresponding hashtag that is picked and is discussed. And there's, every day there's many debates, and then each debate has its own unique hashtag. And so if we collected all hashtags for the show in 2022. So this is all hashtags. So there are multiple shows a day. So there's 636 hashtags for all of 2022. We got all the tweets from these shows and all the tweets from users who are posting actively about these shows. There's around 50,000 users, 100 million plus tweets. And then a lot of these were either in Hindi or English. Surprisingly, even though the show was in English, like around 40% of the tweets were in Hindi, indicating some sort of like other sorts of discussion, not just promotion by the show. Firstly, just looking at the hashtags, we see a very clear bias in terms of the topics being chosen. So most of the topics were either attacking the opposition or supporting the current government, right? Like, so it's more than 50% of the topics were just these two fall into these two buckets. So then we classified the user profiles just based on the Twitter bio and some of their tweets into whether a user is pro BJP or not. And for this, we get around a 92% accuracy on just a binary classification. So it's a very simple task because, it's mostly, the usage of certain words which are nationalistic or religious or so on that indicates clear political support for this party are very clear. So this is a good classifier. So we're able to identify, which of these users is pro BJP or not. Using that, we can then look at the support for the show. So who's tweeting about the show and what is their political leaning? The first thing we see is that the show has around 2,000 tweets a day, so it's not like massive volumes on social media. There is some engagement, but it's not super high. Like it's not like in the millions. There are certain days when there is slightly higher, but it's usually not that active. Like there's still some, there's consistent level of activity. But there are periods where there's the activity spikes, and a lot of this corresponds to coordination by the pro BJP folks, and this is what we show in the paper. The other thing is consistently around 60% of the support and tweets for the show come from this political party, right? Like, so, and most peaks correspond to pro BJP news and coordination. The most important reason why this is important, like, okay, obviously, the show is biased towards this party. It's very obvious that the support will also be from that political party. So why is Why is that a big deal? The big deal is because of this sort of use of this highly invested actor using their other infrastructure for coordinated posting. So we see a lot of evidence of coordinated posting where the infrastructure that the party has built is used in manipulating these hashtags to get it trending, right? Like, so we found dozens of cases where, okay, there's this hashtag that is used, it's called Harga Tiranga, and a lot of people just copy paste the same tweet over and over. And these tweets come from this app called the Namo app, which is a app that belongs to that corresponds to the Prime Minister, Narendra Modi, Namo. And so there's some functionality there that you can just click on a button and you post your tweet on Twitter. So there's some sort of coordination happening, which is organized through this political party, which is now worrying, right? The next thing we did is look at the choice of the hashtag, like how are these hashtags being selected for the show by the show. So what we did is we looked at when the hashtag was first tweeted on social media and when it was used for a debate, and we plotted the difference. So the idea here is if the show is taking inspiration from social media, like we can see a clear difference in when the hashtag was first used. So here's the distribution. So this is the time difference between when the hashtag was first used on social media and when it was used on the show. So around 65%. So, if any of this stuff on the left of this line, of this black line, means that the hashtag was first used on television. All the thing on the right, which is around 35% of the content, these were used on social media prior to being used on the television channel, right? Like, so what this and also around 15% of the hashtags were used at least 2 hours before Republic used them. So the importance here, this is the evidence of the information loop. So close to 100 hashtags, that is 1/6 of all the shows that were done by the channel, these hashtags were first used by BJP supporters on social media before being used on the show, right? Like, so indicating that the producers of the show might be looking at social media to take inspiration from what these social media users are talking about, right? And like I said, like a lot of these topics have seemed to have been inspired by BJP supporters, which is not common, right? Like, so when you're choosing your TV debates, you don't necessarily choose discussions that a particular political party supporter is tweeting about on social media. Obviously, I mean, it's very hard to establish any sort of causal claim here. So to say, okay, this happened on social media and so this happened on television, the mechanism is not very clear. It's also not a clean flow. Like I said, only around 35% of the cases, we see this happening. So this is could not be chance, but it's also not completely, causal, where we clearly see clear evidence, right? Okay, so let me just talk a bit about why this matters. So overall, the thing that's happening is BJP supporters are setting a narrative on social media, tweeting about a topic, and the topic is taken, exact hashtags that are used are taken, and then are debated on television, right? Like, they're amplified to give them legitimacy in a certain sense. And then BJP supporters are back on social media to discuss the narrative on social media again, promoting it to be an issue of national importance, right? Like, so there's this sort of closing of the loop that really makes this surprisingly. I mean, this has been happening for a very long time, and this is a very effective way of communicating your narratives, right? You want to spread a narrative, you don't do it directly, you just use these sorts of, okay, probably some sort of backroom collusion with the channel, where you say use a certain hashtag that is debated, then you amplify that again and create the sort of so the normal users of television or on social media may not be aware of this sort of connection, so we provide some sort of evidence. Okay, so one thing that I was really thinking about is whether this is a trivial finding, right? Like, so, like we have been discussing, so we don't have any evidence of causality here. And the fact that, okay, the channel is pro-BJP, and that's obvious, like from, you look at any content that they produce, it's all pro-BJP. Like, so is this a trivial finding? So still, like, I think this sort of symbiotic relationship between social media, politics, and television are is a very interesting area, right? Like, I mean, think of this in other contexts. In the US, again, like Fox News and Republican Party are very much in coordination, right? Like, so whatever the Republican Party wants to focus on, Fox News is going to amplify that. But we never see this sort of evidence, and it's very rarely any sort of evidence is found on these sorts of backroom talks where, the people who produce these shows talk to political parties. Obviously, that is happening, right? Like, these people work together to set some agenda, right? Like, but it's very hard to find any evidence of this happening. And so even, the little evidence that we find, I think it's even though it's not causal, it is valuable to say, okay, this is obviously, someone used this very specific hashtag, not just once but hundreds of times, and it's just exactly being replicated and used by the show, right? That cannot happen by chance. And so that evidence, I think, indicating the sort of symbiotic relationship between social media, politics, and television, especially in the case where there are these invested actors who can manipulate these landscapes, I think is very, very powerful. Right? Like, so this sort of well-resourced actors who can collude with large broadcast medium to promote and manipulate their cause. I think it's very important to study this. Um, the importance here is, of television is, television provides this sort of legitimacy and the broadcast medium with, one space where you can get very large numbers of views. Okay, so that's the presentation. Thanks a lot.